All right, so let's have a conversation. Let's talk real quick about why, on the 86th anniversary, the 86th birthday of Superman appearing in Action Comics #1, why he kind of sucks and why he's lame duck and why he needs to be put out to pasture for a long period of time. Because quite frankly, where Superman was when he was created back in the late 1930s to where he is now is so vastly different. I highly doubt that Jerry Siegel and Joe Schuster would recognize the character. In fact, it's been so hindered by the movie released on the 40th birthday of the character that we are now in a place where Jesus is more akin to Superman than being an actual ground level hero for justice. And if you don't believe me, here's what we have to talk about. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about Superman when he was created. Because remember, Superman was created in 1938 by Jerry Siegel and Joe Schuster. Originally, Superman's character was conceived as a champion of the oppressed and a fighter against social injustices. Early comic strips portrayed him as taking on corrupt politicians and businessmen rather than superpowered villains or alien threats. He was designed as a figure of hope during the Great Depression, embodying ideals of justice and righteousness in a time of widespread economic hardship. And that's one thing we have to consider, we have to remember, is that he was created during the Great Depression. Something that, while many people might argue we've been through the Great Recession, or we were going to go into another recession when Joe Biden became president, which largely was not true because our economy is actually doing pretty good right now. The stock market is up, unemployment is down, things are getting better. Took a little bit of time, but things are getting better. And so the idea of Superman fighting against corrupt politicians and fighting against corrupt businessmen and really working for the little man is something that has been largely forgotten, right? Or it gets kind of obfuscated and pushed into this idea that he's fighting for the whole world. If that was the case, I mean, just looking at his general power set, don't you think that if he had the ability to do everything, let's just say he was real. Let's just say he is real. His abilities are real and he can literally do all of this stuff. We would have no war. We would have no famine. Climate control would be under control. Climate change would be under control. Let's be fair. We would have no crime. We would have no nuclear weapons. We would have a utopia, if you will. And you might ask yourself, no, that's not the case. That's not how any of this works. How would we have a utopia? How would we have any of this stuff? Because he would be the ultimate and the great deterrent. Okay. We know that when it comes to, let's say, capital punishment, in many instances doesn't necessarily act as a deterrent. And of course, he wouldn't be able to stop all crime in the world, but he would be able to do enough to make sure that the world itself was protected at all times and that we would then be the better people that we want to be, because he was sent here by his father, the only son, to protect humanity, right? To save us from ourselves, so to speak, to, I don't know, maybe answer for our own sins in the past, perhaps. I don't know. That might be a way of looking at it. Kind of interesting that the character was created by two Jewish guys, and the character has been very much turned into a messianic version of Christ, right? That's basically what he is. You know, and people out there will be like, no, but that was Zack Snyder did that in 2013. He totally did it. No, the Christopher Reeve movie in 1978, the Richard Donner movie, the one that is heralded by Kevin Feige, heralded by James Gunn. It is the blueprint. It is the movie that is infallible in the eyes of current comic book movie makers and people who are so afraid of looking past the flaws of that movie and really breaking down the fact that it's pretty absurd. I mean, just in general, right? That this complete invincible character, the only thing that hurts him is a rock from his home planet and magic. I mean, I guess if you want to suspend disbelief enough, that would make a lot of sense, right? Also, he can't look through lead, which seems kind of weird. If you can x-ray everything else but lead all of a sudden, man, you do terrible in dental offices. But the point is that the character is very infallible, and the character is very much designed to be this idea, this unattainable idea of humanity. Because the thing is that he's boring. The character is boring. The stories are boring because he always gets pigeonholed into the same type of story. And that the biggest problem with that is that that is on the writers of the character. Okay. The original creators would not want Superman doing what he's doing today. They wouldn't like it. They would look at him as being more like a Spider-Man type character who maybe occasionally gets drug into a larger world conflict, but mostly just kind of hangs out on the streets of Metropolis, making it a better place for the citizens that live there and hoping to impact change for the citizens that live there. But if you look at the general idea, especially in comic books, of like fighting crime and vigilantism, and this goes for Batman as well, they don't actually accomplish anything. Why would they? If they accomplish their goal, then there's nothing for them to fight. You can actually look at that as being more akin to modern day problems. Actually, not even modern day problems, just problems throughout history. If you actually have a solution to the problem and you're not using it, you're doing that because you're profiting off of the concept of being able to use that problem to make money. And ultimately, Superman is very much indicative of that idea. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at the character as a whole, there's still crime. There's still threats. There's still supervillains. There's still Lex Luthor. There's still all these problems. There's still all of these issues. And I understand people are going to say, but he's not supposed to fix all that. So then why do you, the comic book reader who tells me that he's not a boring character, always put that on him? The way that he's been built up in the minds of the fans is creepy in some ways, because they don't allow for any kind of discussion of the flaw of the character as its whole, as well as its impact on society or its impact in the greater discourse of storytelling and how we view these gods, because that's effectively what he is. Comic book characters, these titans, right? They literally have replaced religious iconography as being the most recognizable on the planet, right? And they're seen as gods. They're seen as the new gods. And yet calling him a Jesus-like figure is somehow still seen as a sin to a lot of his fans, which is kind of funny because they don't want to recognize where they are. They don't want to see what's going on. Superman is not a bad character, but Superman is not an interesting character. Clark Kent is probably a more interesting character. But the problem with it is, though, is that people don't want Clark Kent. They want Superman. And I'm sure there's going to be people that will disagree with me, but at large, people want Batman. They don't want Bruce Wayne. Batman fights interesting villains with, that are ground level, but he's still human. He can be injured. There can be things. Superman can't. He can't. And because he can't, that fear of hurt goes away. But then, of course, there's the argument of, well, what about the people he loves? They can just use those against them. Yeah. That's a trope. But that can be used for quite literally anything. Literally anything. That's why these characters at this point probably need to be retired. And I don't just mean Superman. He's indicative of a larger problem. But in many ways, I think there is a massive, massive problem with comic book movies, comic books in general, comic book characters. It's not necessarily a fatigue, as it is a realization that there's only so many stories you can tell. And we need to really get down to the nitty-gritty of it if we're going to see these characters evolve in a way that's going to be interesting. But people have been stuck now for almost 50 years with a version of Superman that they refuse to evolve. And when it happened in 2013, when that character was destructed and the super was taken away and it was just the man and the man's journey, it was largely attacked, heralded as being an abomination, terrible storytelling, didn't understand the characters. But when you have a character that's gone through so many different runs and a character that's gone through so many different changes and evolutions, and that also gets brought up quite a bit when discussing the continuity of comic books, there is no one answer. There is no one canon. And therefore, it kind of deconstructs everything. Because if you don't have something that you can put your finger on, that you can hold it to, that can be changed at any moment, given an editorial decision of whoever's in charge, how can you really, really be invested in the character? And that is one of the reasons why manga and anime are dominating It's usually one creator, one story who has control. And because of that, there is not any other input from outside writers to delineate the gene pool, so to speak. And I think that's why we're seeing those things take over. And why we're seeing not a growth in the comic book reader. Never mind the fact that we have had massive success with these movies now for coming up on 30 years. Something to consider. Look forward to your thoughts and your opinions. They're going to be fun. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good one. If you want, like and subscribe, but you probably won't. So I'll see you guys later. Peace.